Utah's September air was crisp that evening, the kind that makes everything feel sharper, more alive. Outside the convention center, thousands of young faces gathered, waving flags, chanting slogans, their energy electric. Inside, backstage, Charlie Kirk stood alone for a moment, checking his phone one last time. His smile was confident, practiced. He'd done this 100 times before. Walk out, deliver the message, ignite the crowd. Simple, powerful, effective. But in exactly 4 minutes, his name would flash across every news channel in America. And the reason why? Well, that's not where this story begins. To understand what happened on that stage, you need to know what happened in the moments between life and death. The moments when Charlie Kirk saw something that changed everything. Let's start with the sound. That's what people remember most. Not the speech, not the crowd, but the sound. Charlie adjusted his tie and took a deep breath. From behind the curtain, he could hear the announcer building the energy. A champion of conservative values, a voice for a generation. Charlie Kirk! The roar was deafening. He stepped into the light, arm raised, that signature smile lighting up his face. The crowd erupted. Signs bounced in the air. Cameras flashed like lightning. He reached the podium, gripped both sides, and leaned into the microphone. "Utah, are you ready to take back America?" The response shook the building. He didn't see the young man in the third row, didn't see the way his hand moved inside his jacket, didn't see the cold determination in eyes that had spent months watching every speech, every tweet, every moment of the man on that stage. Tyler Robinson had been waiting for this moment. His manifesto was already uploaded, scheduled to post in 10 minutes. In it, he explained everything. How Kirk's rhetoric had poisoned a generation, how his words were weapons, how silencing him was an act of justice. Charlie was 3 sentences into his speech when the first shot rang out. The sound cut through everything. Microphone feedback screamed. Someone in the crowd screamed louder. Charlie's hand went to his chest, confusion flashing across his face before the pain registered. His knees buckled. The podium caught him for a second, then he went down. Chaos. That's the only word for what happened next. Security rushed the stage. People stampeded toward exits. Parents covered their children's eyes, and Tyler Robinson stood frozen, gun still raised, as officers tackled him to the ground. On the stage, Charlie Kirk lay on his back, staring up at stage lights that suddenly seemed too bright, too far away. He could hear voices, urgent and sharp, but they sounded underwater. Someone was pressing hard on his chest. The pressure was unbearable, but he couldn't move to stop them. "Stay with us, Charlie. Stay with us." But he wasn't sure he wanted to. The pain was fading now, replaced by something else. A coldness that started in his fingers and crept inward. His vision narrowed, the lights dimming at the edges like someone was slowly closing curtains. The last thing he heard before the darkness took him was the wail of sirens, distant and mournful, like the world itself was crying. The ambulance ride was a blur of motion and noise. Paramedics worked with mechanical precision, their faces tense. Charlie's eyes opened once, briefly, and he saw the roof of the ambulance, saw the IV bags swaying with each turn, saw a young EMT mouthing words he couldn't hear. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. "We're losing him," someone said, and then nothing. When Charlie opened his eyes again, he wasn't in the ambulance. He was standing in a place he recognized immediately, though he hadn't seen it in 20 years. The small Baptist church from his childhood, the one on Maple Street where his grandmother used to take him every Sunday. The wooden pews, the stained glass windows, the faint smell of old hymnals and furniture polish. But it was empty. completely silent. The light coming through the windows wasn't normal sunlight. It was golden, soft, almost liquid, filling the space with a warmth that made his chest ache. "Where?" Charlie's voice echoed in the emptiness, and then he saw him, sitting in the front pew, hands folded, looking straight ahead at the altar. A man in simple clothes, dark hair, ordinary features. But there was nothing ordinary about the presence that radiated from him. Charlie knew instantly and completely who he was looking at. His legs moved on their own, carrying him down the center aisle. Each step felt heavy with meaning. When he reached the front pew, he stopped, unable to move closer, unable to look away. Jesus turned his head and looked at Charlie. His eyes were kind, infinitely kind, but there was something else there too. A deep, profound sadness that made Charlie want to weep without knowing why. "Sit," Jesus said quietly. Charlie sat, not because he was commanded to, but because his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. They sat in silence for what felt like hours, but could have been seconds. Time didn't work right in this place. "Am I dead?" Charlie finally asked, his voice small. "Not yet," Jesus replied, "but you're close. Close enough that I could reach you, close enough that you might finally listen." Charlie felt his throat tighten. I've always listened. I've built my entire life on your teachings." Jesus turned to face him fully, and the weight of that gaze was almost unbearable. "Have you, Charlie? Tell me, what did I teach? Love God, love country, fight for what's right, stand against the forces that—" "Stop." The word wasn't harsh, but it cut through everything. "Love God, yes, but the second greatest commandment, Charlie, the one you seem to have forgotten, love your neighbor as yourself. Tell me, who is your neighbor?" Charlie opened his mouth, then closed it. His mind raced through talking points, through arguments he'd made 1,000 times. But here, in this place, they all felt hollow. "Your neighbor," Jesus continued, "is not just the people who agree with you, not just the ones who look like you, think like you, vote like you. Your neighbor is everyone, even, especially, your enemies." "But they're destroying everything," Charlie said, desperation creeping into his voice. "The radical left, the socialists, the people who want to tear down our values. I had to fight them. I had to give people a voice against—" "Against what?" Jesus interrupted. "Against other children of God? You think I divided my message by political party? You think heaven has a left wing and a right wing?" The words hit like physical blows. Charlie felt something crumbling inside him, foundations he'd built his entire identity on beginning to shake. "I was trying to help," he whispered. "I was trying to save this generation." "Were you?" Jesus stood now, moving to the altar, his back to Charlie. "Or were you building an empire on their fear and anger? Tell me, Charlie, when was the last time one of your speeches called for mercy, for compassion, for understanding?" Charlie's mind raced through his recent content. The viral tweets, the fiery speeches, the debates where he'd demolished his opponents with facts and logic. He'd been so proud of those moments. The crowd's energy, the views, the influence. But mercy? Compassion? I called out the truth. That's what people needed to hear." Jesus turned back to him, and there were tears on his face now. Actual tears, rolling down his cheeks, and the sight of them shattered something in Charlie's chest. "Truth without love is just cruelty, Charlie. You wielded truth like a weapon, not like medicine. You were supposed to heal, but you learned to wound. And you got so good at it, so celebrated for it, that you forgot what you were actually doing." "No, "The boy who shot you," Jesus said softly. Tyler Robinson. Did you know he grew up in a Christian home? Did you know he used to pray every night? Did you know that he spent 2 years watching your content, watching you turn faith into politics, watching you make enemies out of neighbors until something inside him broke? Charlie felt sick. That's not... I didn't make him. You didn't pull the trigger, Jesus agreed, but you helped load the gun. You and 100 others like you turned discourse into warfare. You made compromise look like weakness and empathy look like betrayal. And that boy, that broken, confused, angry boy, thought the only way to fight hate was with hate. The tears were flowing freely down Charlie's face now. I didn't mean to. I thought I was doing your work. My work, Jesus said, sitting back down beside him, is love. It's always been love. Even when it's hard, even when it's unpopular, even when it costs you everything. You were given a platform, Charlie. Millions of young people who looked to you for guidance, and instead of teaching them to love their enemies, you taught them to fear them. Instead of building bridges, you built walls. Charlie buried his face in his hands. 20 years of his life, all the speeches, all the influence, all the impact he thought he'd made, suddenly looked different. Not heroic, but tragic. Not righteous, but reckless. It's too late, he choked out. I can't take it back. I can't fix this. Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder, and the touch was like fire and ice and comfort all at once. It's never too late for redemption, Charlie. Even now, even here, you have a choice. Charlie looked up, eyes red and swollen. What choice? I'm dying. You have minutes left, Jesus said. Maybe less. But you could use them for hate, or you could use them for love. You could let your legacy be division, or you could let it be reconciliation. One last message, Charlie. One last chance to show them what I actually taught. They won't listen. My followers, Some won't, Jesus agreed, but some will. And one person choosing love over hate, choosing mercy over vengeance, that's worth dying for. That's what I did, and that's what I'm asking you to do now. Charlie felt the coldness returning to his fingers, felt the edges of his vision beginning to darken again. This place, this moment, it was slipping away. I'm scared, he whispered. I know, Jesus said, and his smile was gentle, forgiving, full of a love that Charlie finally, truly understood. But perfect love casts out fear. And Charlie, you are loved. You've always been loved, even in your mistakes, even in your pride. Now go back and show them what that love looks like. The church began to fade, the golden light dissolving into whiteness, and Charlie felt himself being pulled back toward pain and sound and the world he'd left behind. The last thing he saw was Jesus, still sitting in that front pew, watching him go with tears of hope on his face. The operating room exploded with activity. Monitors beeped frantically. A surgeon called for more units of blood. A nurse counted compressions with mechanical precision. And then, impossibly, Charlie Kirk's eyes opened. He's back, someone breathed. We have a pulse. Charlie's lips moved. A doctor leaned close, trying to hear. What did he say? The nurse who heard it clearly would later tell the story 100 times. How Charlie Kirk, bleeding out on an operating table, used what little strength he had left to whisper 3 words. Get me recording. Sir, you need to rest. You need... Please. His hand gripped the doctor's sleeve with surprising strength. Please. It's important. Last message. The staff exchanged glances. They were professionals. They knew what last message meant. Knew what he was really asking for. A phone appeared. Someone held it steady while another wiped the blood from Charlie's face. The camera light blinked red, And Charlie Kirk, with minutes left of life, looked into that lens and spoke. The video would later be titled simply, "Ah, Charlie's Last Words." It would be shared 30 million times in the first week. It would trend globally. It would make grown men cry and hardened political enemies pause. But that night, in that operating room, it was just one dying man trying to fix what he'd broken. "If you're watching this," Charlie's voice was weak but clear, "then I'm probably gone. And before I go, I need to tell you something I should have said years ago." He paused, gathering strength. "I was wrong. About so much. I told you that the other side was your enemy, that compromise was weakness, that being right was more important than being kind. And I was wrong." Tears mixed with the blood still on his face. "Tonight, someone tried to kill me. A young man who thought violence was the answer. And I want you to know, I forgive him. Completely. Because I understand now. I helped create the world that made him think that was his only option." The monitors behind him began to alarm. Medical staff tried to intervene, but he waved them off weakly. "If I could go back," he continued, "I would tell you something different. I'd tell you that Jesus didn't call us to win arguments. He called us to love people, all people, even the ones we disagree with, especially them." His breathing was becoming labored. "So please, please, if you ever listened to me before, listen now. Choose love, choose mercy, choose forgiveness. Don't let my mistakes become your legacy. The world has enough hate. It needs your love." He looked directly into the camera, and for a moment it seemed like he could see through it, see every person who would ever watch this, every heart that needed to hear it. "I met Jesus tonight, and he wasn't angry. He was sad. Sad that we'd forgotten how to love each other. Don't make him sad anymore. Please." The light in his eyes began to dim. The hand holding the doctor's arm relaxed, fell away. "Tell them," his voice was barely a whisper now, "tell them I'm sorry. Tell them. Choose love." And then Charlie Kirk closed his eyes for the last time. The monitor's steady tone filled the room. A nurse reached for the phone, ended the recording, and stood in stunned silence as the surgeon called the time of death. Outside, in the waiting room, Charlie's family would receive the news with grief. Tyler Robinson, in a holding cell downtown, would watch the video on a guard's phone and collapse sobbing. And across the country, millions of people would have to decide what to do with a message that contradicted everything the messenger had spent years teaching. 3 days later, Tyler Robinson posted a statement from jail. It was brief, raw, and honest. "I killed Charlie Kirk because I thought he represented everything wrong with America, and he did, for a long time. But his last message showed me something. That hate, even when it's aimed at what you think is hate, is still just hate. I took a life trying to stop what I thought was poison, but I was the poison too. We all are when we choose violence over understanding. I will spend the rest of my life carrying what I did, and I will spend it trying to be what Charlie Kirk, in his final moments, asked all of us to be. Someone who chooses love." The statement went viral, not because people forgave what he'd done, but because it forced a mirror up to a nation that had forgotten how to talk without screaming. Charlie Kirk's funeral was held at that small Baptist church from his childhood. Thousands attended, political leaders from both parties, young people he'd influenced, critics he'd debated. They came not to celebrate a political ideology, but to acknowledge something rare, a transformation that happened in the space between life and death. His grandmother, 93 and frail, spoke briefly. Charlie wasn't perfect, none of us are, but at the end he remembered what I taught him when he was small. that God is love, and love is stronger than any political platform, any argument, any division we create. He remembered, and he tried to tell you. I hope you heard him. The video of his last words would become required watching in conflict resolution courses, in seminary classes, in family counseling sessions. Not because it was eloquent, but because it was real. A man confronting his own failure in his final moments and choosing, despite everything, to plant seeds of reconciliation. A year later, Turning Point USA underwent a complete restructuring. The organization's new mission statement read simply, "To engage young people in productive dialogue across differences, building bridges instead of walls." Some of Charlie's former followers felt betrayed. They called it weakness, called it caving to political correctness, called it a betrayal of everything he'd built. But many others, especially the young people who'd been drawn to his passion, if not always his message, found something healing in the transformation. "He showed us you can change your mind," one college student said at a memorial event. "That being strong enough to admit you were wrong is actually the strongest thing you can do." On the anniversary of his death, Charlie's mother released one final thing he'd written, a note found in his phone, typed the morning of the shooting, never sent. "Woke up thinking about Jesus and the Pharisees, how they were so sure they were right, so focused on the law, that they missed the point entirely. And I realized I've become what I used to criticize, so focused on winning arguments that I forgot to love people, going to try to do better, going to remember what actually matters." He'd written it hours before stepping onto that stage, hours before everything changed. Some called it prophetic, some called it tragic. But what no one could deny was that Charlie Kirk's last message, spoken with dying breath, had planted something, a seed of doubt in the certainty of hate, a question in the minds of those who'd made enemies of neighbors. Could love actually be stronger than being right? 10 years after his death, Tyler Robinson was released from prison. He'd served his time, worked in prison ministry, and spent every day trying to live out the message Charlie had died delivering. As he walked out into the sunlight, reporters swarmed him. "What will you do now?" they asked. Tyler looked at the cameras, at the people, at the world that still struggled with the same divisions that had led him to that trigger. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that Charlie Kirk's last words weren't just a dying man's wish. They were a blueprint. Love is the answer. It always has been. And I'm going to live like I believe that, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He walked away from the cameras toward a small church where a group of ex-convicts met weekly to study not politics or ideology, but the simple revolutionary concept that had cost one man his life and given another man his purpose. Love your neighbor, even your enemy, especially your enemy. In that golden place between worlds, maybe Jesus smiled. Not because violence had occurred, not because someone had died, but because in that death a truth had been reborn. That transformation is always possible. That redemption is never too late. That one voice crying out for love in a desert of hate can change everything. And that sometimes the most powerful sermons are the ones delivered with our last breath, when everything else has been stripped away and only truth remains. Charlie Kirk learned that lesson too late to live it fully. But perhaps, in dying for it, he finally understood what Jesus had been trying to teach all along. That love isn't weakness. Love is the only strength that matters, and it's never, ever too late to choose it. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends,